The story about how the fact-checking industry shut down or covered up claims about Ilhan Omar's father really actually obscures the bigger point of how what I call the misinformation complex meddles in American politics and the political process. What happened with Ilhan Omar is there were some claims that her father was a Somali war criminal, and that would have made them coming to America inadmissible as refugees. It was illegal for them to do that. But Snopes, one of the premier fact-checking sites, really covered this up. They claimed that that was a conspiracy theory. They even called it racist. The problem is that it was actually true. He was a Somali war criminal, and this was reported by an outlet called Sahan Journal. This is a journal, a non-profit newsroom dedicated to minority populations in Minnesota. This is not people with some interest in going after Ilhan. Quite the opposite. These are people who are supportive of Ilhan Omar's community. And they came out with an obituary on the death of her father saying that her father, Noor Omar Mohamed, was an esteemed senior officer in the Somali National Army well before the country plunged into anarchy following the fall of the Siad Barre regime in the early 1990s. In other words, he worked for Siad Barre, which was a genocidal dictator. This is what Snopes had called a conspiracy theory. The bigger picture, however, and this is the thing we actually really need to pay attention to, is that they completely took this debate and what should have been a clear-cut journalistic and even governmental investigation off of the rails by kind of stigmatizing it, making it radioactive, making it sound like if you dare to investigate this very clear-cut claim, you are a racist conspiracy theorist. And this is something we've heard over and over with the misinformation complex. It was their most tried and true tactic for debunking so-called or discrediting or really smearing people who dared to look into claims that could negatively affect Democratic Party interests. But when you dig a little deeper, what you find is that Snopes itself was really doing some unethical stuff. The story about Ilhan Omar's father initially came out in a right-wing blog called Gateway Pundit. And Gateway Pundit kind of said that he was a high-ranking official in the Somali military, just like this other guy named Yusuf Ali, who was also a high-ranking official who had been deported from the United States because he was implicated in torture. They were showing that there's a category of type of person that could be deported for committing this crime of coming to the United States, having persecuted someone in Somalia. What Snopes did was pretend that Gateway Pundit was somehow confusing these two different men as the same person, when Gateway Pundit never said anything of the sort. Then what Snopes did was say that because they were both black, Snopes was implying or actually just explicitly alleging or accusing Gateway Pundit of being racist, saying the only reason that these were confused to be the same person is because of racism. But Gateway Pundit never made that confusion. They made a comparison. They didn't try to conflate the two men. Then what Snopes did is they went even one step further, and they said that the only way that you could claim that Ilhan Omar's father had been in the Somali military was by confusing the two men. Therefore, the claim that he had been in the military was itself racist. This is all extremely confusing. It's self-confused. There's no logic to it, but there didn't need to be. The whole point was to bring the word racist out and to attach it to the notion that Ilhan Omar's father served in the military. And that makes it even more ironic that it was a journal, a non-profit newsroom dedicated to minority and communities of having people of color in them that brought this to light and that came out with the actual fact showing that he had indeed been in the military. And this was corroborated by another newspaper in Kenya and a former prime minister of Somalia who said the very same thing. So what we're seeing here is Snopes is bringing in this sort of like white Western progressive worldview, claiming anything that disagrees with their own prerogatives is racist, whereas the people who are in that very community were saying the bald, naked truth about this man. They didn't think there was anything objectionable that he had been in the military, and maybe there's not. but we never got that far. We weren't able to actually see the fact that he had been in the military. And it was all kind of put into what I call an informational stew. You mix in fact, fiction, conspiracy theory, lie, smears, and afterwards it gets heated up, mixed around. You can't pull out the original ingredient. It's extremely effective, and this is how it works. At this same time, the CEO and co-founder of Snopes was caught plagiarizing dozens and dozens of articles from other news organizations. That's a really serious ethical breach. But beyond that, it even shows that the so-called procedures and protocols and all the stuff that was supposed to be in place to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening at Snopes, this is the whole reason that they exist, were not actually in place. This was just a glorified blog. This was an SEO play pretending to be a fact-checking outlet that you could rely on, that you could put your trust in, and that the government and the social media platforms would use to prove something true or false, when in reality, they were defending the interests, the agenda of one of the two political parties in the United States. Obviously, this is an enormous problem. So we need to zoom out here and we need to look at what really is happening with the so-called fact-checking industry, how they work with the media, and how this forms a bigger misinformation complex, using the term misinformation or using the term disinformation to cover up the real activity, which is the advancing the interests of one political party or political issue under the cover of searching for the truth. So be careful. It's tempting. We all want to rely on something. We want there to be some kind of truth or ground truth, and it's comforting to think that there is. But in reality, what this shows is that we all have to do our digging, we have to do our research. But even more important than that, what we need to understand from this is that you can't just come out and say something is racist or something is a conspiracy theory, even when there's actually good reporting behind it. We need to go with the reporting and not with like these adjectives that get thrown around so carelessly by outlets like Snopes.